Hi, I'm Peter Rowlett.
And I'm Katie Steckles. And Peter, what is today's mathematical object?
Today I've brought you a story. I'm going to tell you a story. So there's a story, it's a sort of absent-minded professor story. This guy works at university, let's say MIT, and his wife, they're moving house.
Oh, it's a man, is it?
It's a man.
Yeah, good.
Yes. And the wife doesn't want him involved because he's not great at that sort of thing. So she sends him off to work and says, I'll do the moving house.
Right.
You just come to the new house. And because she knows that he won't remember, she writes down the new address on a bit of paper and puts it in his pocket.
Okay, that level of absent-minded. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's an extreme absent-minded caricature.
Good.
So the day's going on. He has a sudden mathematical insight, reaches in his pocket, grabs a bit of paper, writes all over it, realizes this insight had a mistake in it, throws the bit of paper away.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It happens to me all the time. Yeah.
Yes. At the end of the day, he goes back home to where he used to live, and the house is empty. He can't understand why the house is empty. Where have all the furniture gone? Where's my wife? I don't remember anything. So anyway, eventually he remembers that they've moved, but he doesn't know what to do. And then he sees a little girl, and he says, excuse me, do you know the family that used to live here? Do you know where they've moved to? And the little girl says, don't worry, Daddy, Mummy sent me to fetch you. So that's...
Right.
Now, so what I thought we could talk about is the sort of folklore that you get around this sort of thing. So this is a Norbert, I'm going to say Wiener story. Norbert Wiener, I guess it might be Wiener, depending on, but everything that I've looked up says that if you're an American, then it's Wiener. He was a math professor at MIT. And there are a lot of these sorts of stories about him. So he was, his dates are 1894 until 1964. And he was, he's like cybernetics and information theory. And he did some stuff with noise and Brownian motion, signal processing, control theory, all this sort of stuff. He's influenced John von Neumann, Claude Shannon, and other people. He's married to an academic linguist. They have 2 daughters, and so on and so forth. I've seen it said that one of the daughters was interviewed, and she said, yeah, loads of these stories are exaggerated or made up, and he certainly didn't forget who his children were, but she said the rest of it sounds entirely plausible. So it's
that feels like a funny extension to the idea of someone who would forget where they'd moved house to, but not really plausible, right? That's not a thing people do.
No. So I think there are issues here to acknowledge. There's in a lot of these stories, I don't know about diagnoses, but there's a very clear neurodiversity thing going on with a lot of these stories, and that's an issue because you don't want to be kind of poking fun at people in that way, but at the same time also not really, because so many of the stories are obviously not true or they're just sort of folklore. The thing that I'm really trying to talk about is this archetype of the absent-minded professor on campus and the folklore that grows up around them. And apparently a lot of these same stories get told about Wiener, they get told about von Neumann, they get told about Einstein, they get told about loads of different, who is just the big famous professor on campus who has this kind of reputation.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of it is also almost like a misconception about maths, that this idea that if you are a maths person, the way that you have to be in order to be good at that, because you're obviously one of these top level, cool, extremely well regarded professors, is that you have to be so utterly focused on maths that you would, concentrate on it to the exclusion of any other kind of mental capacity, and not that the idea that someone who's bright enough to be good at maths, or, well, depending on whether you think that's a requirement, but someone who's got a well-developed intellect would not also be good at like keeping track of where they live, and what I mean, for me those things go together, like having your head screwed on makes you good at maths and life, so somehow the fact that one of them can exclude the other seems like a weird notion to me, but
I'm gonna come back to that because like in some of these stories you can't remember his name or things like this that you just think this is obviously I've got a few in different categories that somebody basically collected a bunch of these and published it in a folklore journal. There are a couple of papers, and it's kind of interesting, and he sort of says in the article sort of towards the end of this article, that it's sort of a time and place. There's a sort of campus culture thing going on where you get stories of, fraternity pranks and absent-minded professors and all this stuff. And then as time went on, the universities basically grew too big. So it's no longer the case that everyone on campus knows Norbert, who walks around looking like, Professor whoever, because the place has just become much bigger and more professionalized, I guess.
Yeah.
But so some of the stories, there's a load of stories about him getting about the place. He seems to have had very thick glasses and not been able to see very well. And there's a story that whenever he walked anywhere, he would put his hand on the wall and trace along. And he's doing the maze thing. Do you want to explain the maze thing?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I've written an article about this for New Scientist and done various bits about it. But this notion that if you have a maze and you want to find your way through to the other side, if you just stick your hand on the wall, say the left-hand wall, and follow that wall all the way around, it will definitely get you to the exit, assuming you do this from the start. It might take a lot longer than it would to just find the most efficient route through, but it will guaranteed, because it's kind of like the connected piece of wall that is the left-hand side of the maze is definitely connected to the bit of wall just to the left of the exit. So, otherwise there isn't a route through the maze. So it has to be, but yeah.
So I've seen some versions of this where he's walking along reading a book with his hand on the wall, presumably to stop himself like wandering off to the side or whatever. But then there are other versions of this where he's so dogmatic about his hand on the wall that he will go into rooms and like walk round an entire lecture theatre and back out again because that's what the algorithm tells you to do, which is presumably again the sort of nonsense version of this. There's one as well about apparently the MIT campus was basically a mirrored structure centered on the canteen, and there was somebody who lived in the mirror opposite of his office who worked in that office, and that quite often he would just turn up there and Wiener would be in there working because he's kind of gone the wrong way out the canteen and then just done the route but the mirror of the route without noticing that he's gone to the wrong place, which one that I quite like was there's a story that he's between the maths bit and the canteen, they're walking across a quad or a sort of open courtyard or something, and somebody stops him and asks him a question and they have a little chat, and then at the end of it Wiener says, "Excuse me, before you interrupted me, which way was I heading?" And the guy says, "Oh, you were heading that way." And he says, "Ah, good, then I've already had lunch." And goes back to his office. Yeah, which again, it's just there's obviously more going on there than and the other getting around what I've written down is that he gets home. I think the best way of telling this, or the most amusing way of telling this, is he gets home at the end of the day, or he comes, on a train from a conference or something like this, and his car is gone. And so he's in a panic and he rings the police and he says, "Hello, I've just got home, my car's been stolen." And it turns out that he drove to the conference and forgot and then got the train back again. There are some versions where he just gets home and realizes, or his wife points it out or something, but there are some where he's reported it to the police. This is what these stories do, is they kind of evolve and get retold in the telling. Yeah.
I mean, part of me wonders if it's almost like, if it's certainly a campus thing where the students are telling these stories to each other, that it's like you've got this person who's this figure of intelligence and who knows all this mathematics stuff and who will absolutely bamboozle you in a lecture with this incredible maths that you need to try and get your head around. And the thought that this person outside of the lecture theatre is just this useless, completely absent-minded failure that can't even remember whether they've had lunch or not, I guess is a way for the students to feel less bad about how difficult they're finding their studies or something like that, that they're kind of trying to bring this person down in a sort of notional way because they've got this elevated status.
Yeah, definitely. I think also, though, some of what I really like about these stories is that I find them extremely relatable.
That's the thing. Some of them seem to be kind of borderline things that people just do, right? Definitely, gone into a room and forgotten what I came in for and that kind of thing. But
also, I'm just
at the extreme end of it.
I'm awful at this direction thing. That we did once move house, and I invited some friends around, and we went to the pub, and then we're sort of halfway home, and one of them says, "Aren't we going in the wrong direction?" Yeah, we were going in the wrong direction. It wasn't
Yeah.
exactly that I'd forgotten where I live, but I just was wrong,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Or a friend and I went on holiday when we finished university. We had some weeks traveling around, and we would like go from a hotel to a museum, and then we'd go and look around the museum, and we'd come back out again, and he would turn to me and say, "Right, which way is the hotel?" And I could never tell because I just couldn't remember. Like, we've come to this door from one of these directions, and I don't know which direction it is. Leave me alone. It's stuff like that I just think is very,
I think it doesn't help if you've got a building like MIT where it is a big mirror image of itself, because that is in itself probably confusing. Like modern architecture, you often get these kind of apartment blocks that are just three of the same thing stacked next to each other. And we've definitely had people come around to visit us and they've gone into the wrong entrance.
Right.
Having already been to our flat and seen the inside of our building, but they've gone in the wrong entrance. But because it's just an identical copy of the same building, they've come up to the right floor and they're like, the numbers are all wrong on these flats. Like, what? Where's your flat? And they phoned us. Like, am I outside? I don't know.
Right.
And we've worked out that they've just gone in the wrong door. Or like, I think one time we moved flats from a flat in one building to a different flat in the same building, and the new flat was the mirror image of the flat we moved out of.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really unnerving. Like,
there's a house just opposite that's the mirror of ours, and it's very unsettling. Absolutely. That's what I find a bit odd about this idea that you might walk off into the mirror version of your normal route and not notice, because it's very unsettling, But there's this sort of truth to it, I guess, that, and the the forgetfulness, I think I find very related as well. This morning, I took my son to school, and I was given by my wife a parcel to take to the post office. And that is a huge danger point. Because this used to happen all the time. That I used to have a job where I walked to work, so now I get the train to a different city usually, or I work from home. But she would like give me a letter to put in the post box on the way, and I would arrive at work still holding that letter. And then I would put it down on my desk without noticing that I've done that. And then I would find it there 3 days later, and then, take it home and try and post it on the way home, and arrive home still holding it. And she's like, "Didn't you post that 3 days ago?" But it's just like, I am trying, but somehow my brain isn't noticing at the right point that I'm holding this thing. But I wouldn't put it in my bag, because then I would definitely forget it. I would always hold it, but that still didn't quite work. I don't know.
Yeah, it's this notion of executive function, that it's like there's a level of things that there's the very basic level of things that your brain has to do, like keep your heart beating and make sure you're breathing in and out and stuff. And then there's a level above that of like walking around and not falling over and all of this kind of thing. And then, someone in the chat has pointed out that when you say "I'm trying," does your wife say "You're very trying"? I mean, we've all done it though, right? If you've got something else on your mind, or if there's other things going on, and I imagine if you're going into work, you've got lectures to deliver, or you've got things that you have to do. And I wonder if this absent-minded professor trope is kind of like, notionally, the reason why this person is so useless is because their brain is full of all this important maths that they're always thinking about, and there isn't room for any of these things. But just a normal amount of life, there's enough things to help you forget, like something like posting a letter, because it's hard, right?
Yes.
There's a lot.
But then the other side of these stories is, as you say, that then the person is brilliant in other ways. So there's one about, the thing where there are two trains coming towards each other and a fly keeps flying back and forth between them. Do you know that problem?
I think, there's like, how long does it take how far does the fly travel in the time it takes for the two trains to get to where,
Yeah, you're given the speed of the two trains, and the fly starts on the nose of one, it goes to the nose of the other, it instantaneously heads back again and back again and back again and back again until the two trains, I don't know, do they crash or do they just pass? I don't know.
Go past each other, hopefully,
I guess. And then... So the story is, and I think I've heard this about von Neumann as well as, but anyway, the story is that he's told this problem and he answers really quickly, and the response says, "That's pretty strange, Professor. Usually, if you ask an engineer a question like that, he works out that the bee flew for half an hour, and he knows the speed of the bee because it's given in the question, so he knows that it's." Whatever distance. But he said usually if you ask a mathematician that question, he'll set up an infinite series and carry out a load of equations until it converges. And Wiener says, "Oh yeah, that's what I did." It's that sort
Right.
of, because it was like
Yeah.
3 seconds, he assumed he'd
Yeah.
seen the shortcut. Ah, very clever that you've seen the shortcut, even though you're the
Yeah.
archetypal stereotype of a mathematician. And he's just like, no, I'm just that quick. It's
Yeah.
that sort of story that you get. There's a bunch
Yeah.
of stuff about him teaching. Walking into the wrong classroom and just starting to write very complicated equations on the board until someone points it out and things like that. But also,
I mean, we've all done that.
yeah. Have we? Right, good. That's an insight into your teaching career. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's this thing about not showing you're working. So he apparently, again in the stories, has a habit of just like setting a question and then just thinking for a bit and then writing the answer on the board. And it says, eventually the student got absolutely fed up with him doing this, and he sort of puts his hand up and says, "Dr. Wiener, how did you arrive at this answer?" And he sort of looks up, doesn't say anything, thinks for a minute, and then writes the answer on the board again. It's like, and the student says, we know that's what you did, but how did you get that answer? And another silence, he looks off into space, and then he writes the answer down again. And they're saying, yeah, but what do I, we know this is the answer, but how did you do it? And Wiener says, but it must be the right answer, because I got it by 3 different methods. It's like,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
The classic one that I've heard is that someone, like the professor says, oh, and of course this step is trivial.
Right, yes.
And
that's
says,
told in this collection of
how does
folklore
it
tales
work?
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and they think for ages and then say, yeah, it's trivial. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think we did that one in
Yeah.
the jokes episode that we did, which is
Yes.
very related
Yeah.
to this. A lot of these stories are folklore in that sense, aren't they? Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
almost just like very long jokes, right?
Yes.
So they're a story with a funny ending.
Yeah. Well, the
Yeah.
extra kicker on the writing things on the board is one of the students says, Dr. Wiener, on problem 27, I found your solution very interesting, but I did it in a different way. So he wrote the question on the board and then stood there and looked thoughtful and then wrote the answer. And Wiener sort of looks at it for a bit and then scratches his head and says, well, your answer is right, but your method was wrong. just
Yeah.
lovely.
I mean, a lot of this is kind of poking fun at the way that maths works as well, right?
Yes.
So often you can sort of come to something in your own mind and not have a completely fully formed description of how you've got there, but it's sort of poking fun at that in a way.
Absolutely.
I guess the classic mathematician kind of thinking about things in a different way almost story is, and potentially actually a true story about Grothendieck.
Right.
Who, when needing an example of a prime number for something, just said, a prime number like, 57 or something.
Right. Yeah.
And the 57 is not prime, it's divisible by 3, but like it's become known as the Grothendieck prime because everyone's like, you idiot, you've said a thing that's not a prime number. But actually, when you think about it, it's not relevant what the prime number was. Like he just was looking for an example of a prime number to say out loud.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the time in maths, you're kind of almost a level above the level of actually needing the number.
Yes.
In some sense that like the thing that you're talking about would work for any prime number, so you just need a prime number. And like that, I guess, is part of the way that mathematicians think in some sense. And it's funny because it really happened, I think.
Yeah.
And like it's like, lol, this is the Grothendieck prime, and it's the sort of prime that it feels really prime, right? It's sort of, you want it to be prime, but it isn't.
Yeah.
It's possibly like the smallest number that feels quite as prime but isn't,
It sort of almost
feels like it
feels
should
prime
be.
until you think about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But no, I remember once being trying to explain to some people in a pub some puzzle that involved cars, and I had these cars going at like 3 miles an hour and 7 miles an hour or something like that. And somebody said, "Oh, those are completely ridiculous speeds for cars." And I said, "Oh yeah, you're right. Well, just scale it by an appropriate amount until they're sensible." Anyway, and then I pressed on with the thing, and somebody I know said to me afterwards, "That's such a mathematician thing to say. like these numbers are not important. I'm not telling you about cars. I'm trying to set up this puzzle. You know what you're on about. Yeah. There are a lot of these things about his ego, which I don't like very much. The one I thought I might tell you is. There's a story about a student who's working with him, and he just goes completely 100 miles an hour and constantly throwing out ideas, and they're playing around, and like every day, please come back first thing tomorrow and we'll carry on and all this. And this student kind of wants a weekend off. And somebody says to him, I'll tell you how you get a weekend off. What you do is this. And he goes and does it. So he says, sorry to interrupt you, Professor, but I was reading some of your early papers and I don't think you're the greatest mathematician in the world. And Wiener sort of stops and sits down and looks completely dejected. So the student leaves and goes and has a weekend off or whatever, and then comes back on Monday and he's still sort of sitting there looking absolutely miserable. And he went back to the person who'd given him this advice and he said, what do? I seem to have broken him. And he said, oh yeah, you just have to turn it off again. So he went back and he said, do you know, I've had another look at those early papers of yours, and actually I think you are the greatest mathematician who ever lived. And he was like, oh, all right, and off they go again. It was just this sort of switch
Excellent.
on and off the ego. I don't know. But yeah, there's quite a lot that I'm just like, yeah, we don't need that in the world, I guess.
Yeah, well, I guess they're potentially playing on aspects of this notion of a top-level professor that people want to sort of correctly mock and ridicule, like the idea that it's the kind of elitist, you know, I'm the best, no one needs to, no one can compete with me sort of notion. And, there might be some people who are like that, but a lot of maths professors, certainly that I know, are just lovely people and, wouldn't think that of themselves. And whether it's something that you kind of project onto them, that because everyone else is saying, oh, this person is incredible, that you project that onto them as an attitude when maybe that's not how they feel about it.
Yeah, definitely.
We all get imposter syndrome, right? We all walk into rooms and just write nonsense on a blackboard even though it's not the right room, and we all get imposter syndrome. Yes.
Yeah, and it is entirely possible that any one individual human might be so conceited that they have this view of themselves, but also it seems unlikely based on the majority of humans. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. One thing I saw was sort of talking about this as a lot of this is, I think the phrase was professional slurs, sort of in the sense of ethnic slurs, but they're based on your profession, and told a lot of the jokes, like the sort of jokes we covered in that other episode, the engineer, a mathematician and a physicist are doing a thing, and they all behave in a stereotypical way. But the one that I quite like for that is that perhaps we'll end on, I don't know, but it is the physicists in a balloon and it's very misty and they've lost where they are, and so they kind of descend and they spot a person on the ground and they shout, "Where are we?" And a lot of time passes, and then just as the balloon's being carried away by the wind, the person shouts back, "You're in a balloon!" And one of the physicists said, that person was a mathematician. And the other one says, how do you know? Well, he took an awful long time to answer, and when he answered, his answer was 100% correct and totally useless. It's that sort of folklore that this author was talking about as being, slurs based on your profession.
Yeah.
I can see the sense of that.
I think it also builds in the sort of high level professor thing, because theoretically that could be a professor in any subject, but I think specifically a professor in maths is kind of got this absent-mindedness, which is I guess the term that we use to describe this, but that either it's because they're so focused on the maths, and like in the first story you gave, it was specifically because he did a bunch of maths that he forgot he lost the piece of paper with the address or whatever. But and I think also something that jumped out at me from that one is it's often a guy.
Definitely.
As the stereotype of a top level maths professor, and he's always got a wife. And it's this long-suffering
absolutely.
The notion that someone is so not even capable of looking after themselves to that extent, then obviously they've got someone at home who's doing the cooking and the cleaning and the washing their clothes and stuff. And that's an extremely outdated notion, and a lot of I'm going to caveat this by not blanketing this on everyone, but almost all maths professors I know are fully capable of doing all their own housework as well as not getting lost on campus and stuff. But it happens to all of us sometimes, and I wonder if there's a bit of recognition of like, oh, I made a silly mistake the other day, and even if that guy can, this incredibly clever maths guy can do this, then maybe it's okay if I do.
Yeah, and because the other person who came up when I was thinking about von Neumann and Einstein, all these people who have these stories about them, as has just been pointed out in the chat, is that Erdos has a lot of these stories as well, and doesn't have a wife at home to look after him.
No, but he'd literally just turn up at people's houses. And
there are stories, aren't there, where of course, he comes to see a male mathematician, and the male mathematician's wife has to then look after. So there's still this kind of support network kind of thing going on, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to get myself a wife. That's all I can say. Cool. Yeah. So I guess the object there was a story.
Norbert Wiener stories.
A Norbert Wiener story. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Norbert Wiener stories seems to be a category all by itself, so that'll do. Yeah,
it's, as you say, it's like the folklore of maths, right? It's the way that people from outside of maths perceive mathematicians.
Yes.
And I really hope it's something that is as outdated as the stories themselves. But
Yeah. Yes, I do too.
It still makes me laugh. So,
yes. And I think that's what, absolutely. It's the kernel of truth that you can detect at the heart of a lot of these things. And like I say, a lot of them I find very relatable, not to that extreme, I guess. Yeah.
So we hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode of the podcast. Both Peter and I are available on the internet in various forms. So if you search online for Peter Rowlett or Katie Steckles, you will find our various social media places.
We both blog at a website called aperiodical.com, which is where you can find more episodes of this podcast.
And both Peter and I are members of the Finite Group, which, as you may have noticed, we've been mentioning that people are in the chat. We are recording a podcast in the Discord server for our Patreon, which is called the Finite Group. If you're interested, you can join, and then you may be able to listen to the recording of future episodes of this or the monthly live streams that we do there. If you head to patreon.com/Finite Group, you can find out more.
If you have any thoughts or suggestions or want to email us any funny stories, you can do that, objects@aperiodical.com.
The music is Funk Game Loop by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons.